And I think most folks who have been successful in their careers, in leadership, have figured out how to push the edge far enough so that they're taking enough risks right before they fall. Let me take another moment in my career before or after my pre-med time. So I moved out to San Francisco in part because I have always viewed this part of the country as really the Asian American capital of the world. And when I moved out here, I wanted to be a civil rights attorney. Spent time working for a great organization and thought, you know, I'm never, ever, ever going to lead. 1999 rolls around, the first .com era. How many of you were part of that first .com era here in the Bay Area? All right, thank you for being pioneers. In 1999, a good friend of mine from law school, Asian American woman, she said, you know, David, I have this idea. She pitched me the idea, and she said, I think you have some ideas on how to help, about how to use politics on the internet. We came up with this business model, and she said, you know, David, I love this idea. I think we should start a company on it. And I said, you know, I kind of like what I'm doing as a civil rights attorney. It drives me. I enjoy getting up every day doing that. She called me a few weeks later and said, David, I'm serious. I want to start this company. And I said, you know, I get that. It's pretty cool. Maybe someday I'll do it. So fast forward about a month later. My boss at my nonprofit organization calls me and says, David, we have some terrible news. The funding for your project as a civil rights attorney representing immigrants just went away. I don't know if I can hang on to you for more than 6 or 8 weeks. And yes, I see some of your eyes go, bing. That was exactly what occurred to me on a Friday night about 13 years ago. And the very next day, my friend, at 10 o'clock in the morning, the phone rings. And it's about this time, and I had gone out late the night before, drowning myself in sorrow about how I was going to think about my career. And an old school phone, because we didn't have cell phones back then, old school phone rings next to my ear, and I pick it up. And it's my friend, and she said, David, I'm going to ask you one more time. I know you've never started a company, you don't know anything about the private sector, but I'm going to start this. Do you want to start it with me? I said, absolutely. I mean, the point of the story is oftentimes those inflection points in your career, in your life, come from moments that you may view as failures, as real down points in your life. I went on to running this tech company for over 8 years. It became part of what actually launched my career as I ran for office. Which gets me to lesson number 4 about leadership. I happen to think that the ideal model of leadership is one of service. Most people think about leadership as one of amassing power, whether you are the corporate CEO or you are the head of the San Francisco Board of Supervisors. And that certainly is a traditional model of leadership. But I happen to think that the much more important model of leadership is one of service, of the type of service that NAAAP is involved in. And I want to thank Chris Doe and others who are leading this organization, because I know you think about how NAAAP is building community, building leadership, but doing it in a way really so that we can all give back. In 2008, there was an opening at the San Francisco Board of Supervisors. And I decided to run in part because my district, which includes the oldest Asian American community in the country, San Francisco's Chinatown, had never been represented before at the Board of Supervisors. But just as importantly, I wanted to run because there's tremendous need in our community. You know, all of us here, every single person in this room, went to college. Most of you probably went to graduate school. Most of you probably have very good and stable jobs in the private sector. Just a few blocks from here, if you just go up 3rd Street into Chinatown, up Kearny, you will find thousands of families who are making less than $15,000 a year. Hundreds of families who live 3, 4, 5 people to a 10 by 12, 10 by 15 foot room in buildings that are prone to earthquake, prone to fire. And I know this because every couple of months I show up at the scene of another fire. Many of these families, their breadwinner works in a restaurant, works in a hotel, works in minimum wage jobs or sub-minimum wage jobs. In fact, Chinese restaurant workers in San Francisco, half of them make below the minimum wage. 90% of them don't have health insurance. Now just think about that. That is not the case for anyone in this room. There is tremendous need in our community. And I can assure you that when you wake up in the morning and your job is to figure out how to address that situation, you get up pretty darn fast. Which leads me to my last sort of thought for all of you this morning about leadership. Leadership is not just about building community, but it is about being community. It's about coming together in a room like this and thinking, how are we going to not just lead the next Fortune 500 company? How are we going to lead a local community? But how are each and every one of you going to lead every single day and do that with each other? One thing that I really hope that all of you think about today are, think that during the course of this day, you're going to find 5 people who you might be able to change not just your personal future with, but the community's future with. For me, whether it was my Asian American friend who I started my company with and ended up hiring over 100 folks over the last 8 years, whether it be my political friends who are now in office with me as we pass legislation to help immigrants or folks who live in those fire-prone buildings, or whether it be all of you thinking about how are you going to take back your lessons back to your workplace. I can assure you that the connections that you make right now are ones that will help you lead. There are folks in this room who will not only be your business partners, not only be your personal friends, they will be your mentors, they will be your ground troops, they will be the community that we will work together to make sure that all of you who frankly really represent the next generation of activists and leaders here in the Bay Area and here throughout the country, the future of our community really rests with you. All of you, every single one of you, those who are whispering in the back, those of you who are in the front just thinking about whether you should leave the job you're in right now, those of you who are trying to decide if you want to start a company or if you might even want to do a crazy thing and run for office. So I encourage you to get involved. I encourage you to think about leadership. And one just final coda, I encourage you to think about politics. As I've often told the leadership of NAAP, I very rarely, despite the huge number of Asian Americans we have in San Francisco, find individuals who are willing to run for office. And I say this as someone who is 37 days away from, hopefully, my own reelection to the Board of Supervisors. Assuming I am successful in November, in 4 years, I will be leaving my office. And at this moment, I don't know who I would like to support to replace me. I'm looking. And I know that there's a generation of elected leaders like me who are looking for that next generation. And so I encourage you to think about leadership in every field, but particularly politics, particularly community service. And with that, welcome to San Francisco. Great to see you. I look forward to seeing you guys leading in the community.